few years ago, videos like How I Learned English Without Studying or How I Became Fluent in Italian in 7 days went absolutely viral, along with something called comprehensible input, an idea that by simply being exposed to a language long enough, you will at some point become fluent in it. No active studying or hard work involved. In this video, I actually want to talk about why the comprehensible input method will not make you fluent and what to do instead. A little disclaimer before we start, I'm not relying on any scientific research for this video. Everything I say is based on my experience alone, so you're completely free to either agree or disagree. With that said, let's dive in. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with the idea of active and passive learning. Passive learning, which is reading or listening, is essentially consuming language in a passive way, while active learning, writing or speaking, implies active practice of the language, either in a conversation or through writing something of your own. I strongly believe that comprehensible input, which is essentially passive learning put into very pretentious words, is a highly misleading idea that by simply surrounding yourself with the language and doing nothing else, you will master it almost magically. But here's the reality check. No amount of YouTube videos or TV shows will make you fluent in a language if that's the only thing you do. There is another side to this very harmful argument, which some people phrase as, well, kids do learn languages this way, after all. And to this, I have two things to say. Firstly, kids are surrounded by the language 24/7. And if you're an adult, I don't think you can afford to watch movies all day, every day for 5 years in the hopes of becoming miraculously fluent in a language at some point. And secondly, I assume you're learning it to be able to converse on various topics using advanced vocabulary, not the primitive words at the level of a 5-year-old. At the same time, this is not me completely underestimating the importance of watching something in a foreign language. On the contrary, I think it's a crucial element that should not be ignored. That said, if this is the only method that you're relying on to reach fluency, then I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're on the wrong path. Now, of course, this ultimately leads us to the question of what do I do then to become fluent? And my answer to this is very simple. You need to balance active and passive learning. Sounds straightforward, right? Yet active learning is actually something that a lot of people struggle with because, let's be frank, it requires a lot more effort than sitting in front of a screen watching yet another K-drama. Now, don't get me wrong, I love watching stuff in foreign languages, but I get use out of it not when I'm blindly following the subtitles, but when I'm actually able to recognize how words are formed, which tense is being used by the actor, and how words come together in a sentence. And no, this is not something that you'll be magically able to understand or tune into if you have zero knowledge of grammar whatsoever. Speaking of active learning, if you're daunted by the prospect of having to write anything in a foreign language, I've actually made an entire video detailing how you can get into it even as a beginner. This is by far the easiest method that I came up with over the years of trying to overcome the friction and to finally begin to write. And if producing a piece of writing of your own feels like an impossible task, you can even start by writing down exercises or copying texts or dialogues by hand in your notebook, because it still counts as active learning, at least in my books. This way, you'll be activating not only your visual system, but also your motor system, which will lead to a much better retention and memorization of new words and grammar structures. Whichever foreign language you're studying, I strongly urge you to ask yourself if you're leaning heavily in the direction of active or passive learning. Because if you're spending too much time consuming information and nearly not as much time writing or speaking, then your ability to express yourself in a foreign language will be quite poor compared to your passive understanding of it. Ultimately, I think we're learning foreign languages not only to be able to understand them, but to actually use them to connect with other people, either through conversations in a formal or informal setting, or through writing. Again, it can be anything ranging from a text message to a formal email to an academic paper. Therefore, instead of simply stopping at having watched a movie, take the next step. Use those new words, learn additional grammar, so that the next time you're watching something in a foreign language, you're able to recognize more of what is being said and pick up new words in a way that makes sense. Personally, I like watching movies because they provide a great visual backdrop to what's being said, which eventually translates into visual association with new words. But again, if you do not do the dirty language work behind the scenes, if you do not study word formation, grammar, and other important elements of the language, then essentially you're passing on an opportunity to pick up new words and solidify grammar through a very enjoyable process of watching a movie. Equally, if you're already writing a lot and are trying to speak, you will accelerate your progress significantly by watching the proverbial movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, and reading a wide variety of texts. In this particular case, passive consumption will be effective because it will be proportional to your active practice of the language. Keyword here being proportional. All in all, there is no magical shortcut to mastering a language. Just like any other area of our lives, it requires a well-rounded approach and a lot of time and practice. So please do not be misled by easy solutions that are trying to sell you fluency without any studying. For what it's worth, language learning is satisfying because of the amount of effort you put into it. And success, at least the way I see it, is being able to find ways to study that are both enjoyable and efficient. Thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe for more language learning content, and I'll see you in the next one.